But today I want to talk something very different, kind of related to the social climate we are in and the fast pace of life that's going in even in the pandemic. And even in the pandemic, we are facing questions of, oh, I'm bored in my career, I want something new and different, and what is next for me? What's going to happen next? So we want to address what's going to happen next. And here I want to come up with a framework that can help you later on, whenever you have this question, to put it into practice and find your next goal. As I mentioned, the world is changing at highest pace as ever. And one of the reasons is we are asking what's next oftentimes is because the technologies and frameworks and programming languages, all of that keeps updating and changing. And not only that, but also emojis. Even if you don't work in tech, you have to keep up with even small things like emojis. What's the latest of emojis coming in the new iOS? So we all are running to keep up with all of these changes. And, you know, at some point of time, we get tired and we get bored with what we have. And we do look for something new and something different, especially in our careers, especially in tech industry, because the rate of advancement in tech is so high nowadays. So we ask ourselves, what's next? And if you ever been in this situation, or you're at this situation right now, that you're asking yourself, what is next? I can tell you that now you are in your pivot point. Most of us, when we hit a pivot point or asking ourselves what is next, we tend to kind of rely on our passion. We ask ourselves, what excites us the most? What do I like the most? Okay, what can I do? What I like the most? What are my interests are? But the big question here is, should we let the passion drive us, or should we drive our passion? I remember myself 7 years ago when I started my first job. I was working in this content management system company in the heart of San Francisco. It had this beautiful building with marble flooring. When I enter the building every day, I can get my cup of coffee, enter elevator, go find my desk. I had a corner desk right next to the window. I could see the whole Montgomery Street all the way down from my desk. I did great at my job. I was the to-go person. I was growing. I was leading projects. I was happy, but at the same time, I was unhappy. Something were poking me. I wanted something different, something new. I knew everything already. And I was at the point in my career that I wanted a change. So I went to my manager. We had our one-on-one conversation. We went to this room with white walls and nothing on the wall and a bare room. And my manager said, and he was very stressed that day because we had a big lunch coming up. And I was anxious, you know, punching my hands together. Should I tell him? Should I not tell him? So I finally went ahead and said, you know what? I am bored. I am bored with my job right now. I know everything and I just want a new challenge. And for a minute, he was just frozen. And he was like, you're doing really great and you're amazing at what you do. What can I do for you? And we started the conversation and we ended up knowing that, okay, if I go and work on a different part of the product, maybe that would be a new challenge for me and keep me engaged. So that was the first time I asked in my career, what's next? But this happened many, many, many times. I can say every 1 year to 1.5 years, I hit the same point that I'm bored and I'm super comfortable and I want something different. And right now, actually, I hit that point after 1 year and 7 months at Netflix. I was having a conversation with my manager. What's next for me? What's the next step? And you know, at the beginning, I felt there is something fundamentally wrong with me. I mean, like, what the hell? Why I'm hitting these type of points in my career too often, that I am in a point that I'm unhappy, although everything is great at my job. There is nothing I can poke at, say, this is bad for me. But I'm unhappy and I want something different. I want a new challenge. I want to get uncomfortable. So I felt maybe something wrong with me initially. So I went and I did a lot of research around what this question is, what is the state of asking my next? And today I'm going to share that further with you. So if you don't already know me, I'm Naz. I work at Netflix as a principal engineer, and right now I'm working on infrastructure projects at Netflix. If you want to find more about me, feel free to hit my website, naz.dev, or find me on social media. So what is a pivot? After I hitting these many points in my career after 3 to 4 years, I went ahead and did the research, and I found this really great book called The Pivot. I figured out means a pivot, so I found this book from Jenny Blake, who wrote this amazing book, and I started to learn about it. My learnings are this. We almost think about pivots that it should be a drastic change. When I think about what is next, I should not stay in that company. I should just leave and go something new, find another position, another star company where I can shine more. But it's not like that. Pivots are not like that. If you're asking yourself what is next, doesn't mean that you should go into a drastic change. Like if you're an engineer, maybe find something in arts that I've never done so. Actually, pivots are the opposite. Pivot is just a mindset. It's something that you can discover your next move. It is very personal to you, and not only means there is nothing wrong with you, but also it's very natural and it's very expected. I learned all high performers hit pivot points once in a while, and it's very natural for them to ask what is next every now and then. Actually, this is what they breathe for. They just want new challenges and they just want to grow. They can stay still and do nothing and just be comfortable. So growth is a part of asking what's next. If you are asking yourself, oh, am I doing enough? Or am I comfortable? I'm too comfortable. Maybe I want a new challenge. That means you have a growth mindset and you're asking for what's next. So what is a pivot? If you're looking at Jenny Blake's book, she has an amazing definition. So pivot is a methodical shift in a new related direction based on the foundation of the strengths and what is already working. This is an amazing definition for the state of what's next. So let's take a look at this. When we usually think about growth, we always think growth is a linear line. We kind of have a junior engineer, then I will become a senior engineer, then I will get promoted. I will think about this kind of traditional ladder, corporate ladder that I have to climb vertically and go up. But that's actually not it. Growth is not linear, and it wasn't definitely linear for me. For me in my career, actually, this is how the growth looked like for me. I was up and then I came down and went up and then down. So for me, it was kind of like a wave. I didn't always climb the corporate ladder. I joined a company as a junior engineer and then left as a senior, joined another company as a staff, left as an architect, joined another company as a senior, left at some other position. So it's not like that you have to always climb up. It's actually what's your direction. And your growth is something that is going to direct those positions toward. So what do you do when you actually hit a pivot point? There are three options for you. So you can either pivot, which is great. You can plateau, and plateauing means you're doing nothing. You're comfortable. You're getting your salary. You're doing your work. Everything is great. You're gonna retire at that position, and that's it for you. You're not gonna go more. That's it. That's the end. Or you're gonna take an active decline, and that's when the position doesn't suit you anymore. So how do you choose to pivot? Where do you go? We definitely want to pivot or plateau. It really depends on what's goal in your life is. If you want to keep going, definitely the choice is to pivot. So when you pivot, where you have to pivot, and then we're coming to define these zones. We do have a panic zone, a stretch zone, comfort zone, and a stagnation zone. When you want to pivot, you have to be in your stretch zone. And what does that mean? It means that you pivot into something that it's not gonna really stretch you so much, so you panic because you don't know anything, so you totally shifted into something very different and very new. And also you're gonna make enough shift so you won't be that much of a comfortable also anymore. So you want something in between. You want something that challenge you, You're not comfortable, you're not panicked, but you're challenged and you can learn and you can grow. So that's where you want to identify what are my strengths and which zone I'm going to enter. After you identify your zone and identify that you have to pivot, then how do you pivot? What's your baseline? And now we are getting back to this definition from Jenny Blake that talks about the baseline. So she mentions you have to pivot based on the foundation of your strengths. What's working for you? You don't have to pivot on what you don't know. You have to pivot on your strengths, on the things that are working, on your strong points. I often look at ballet dancers, when they make a turn, and they always have one of their foot planted on the ground, and that's their ground foot. So when they make these huge turns, like 50 turns, and when they pivot, their strength is their strong leg or strong foot that is on the ground. And you can imagine yourself as that ballet dancer that you're trying to pivot yourself into air. You're trying to go into something new, something different, that you're all the way in the air, but you have to have a planted foot. Otherwise, you will fall. And that's very important that you identify what are those skills that you can use as your planted foot. What are you strong at? So when you take some time to look at yourself, identify your weaknesses and your strengths, now it's time to plant those strengths. So when you ask yourself, what's next now? What do you do first? You're not going to call a recruiter and find a new position. No, you're going to think about your strengths. You're going to identify those strengths and you're going to put that planted feet on the ground. So you're going to plant that strengths. And how do you really define those strengths and planted foot? One way is to think about your future. How does the success look like? Define where you want to be and relate it to where you are right now and identify those skill set that you have that can use as your strengths. When you identify your strengths, which is great, now it's time to think about that vision you had from a year from now and connect the gaps to where you are. Like as an example, I want to become a director in a company, right, in 5 years. Let's say that's my plan. And now I'm an engineer. Okay, what's lacking here? So I identify the gap. What are the skills? What are the things that is lacking? And you can fill these gaps with 3 things, which are really important: people, skills, and projects. Who can help me get to that position? What are the skills that help me get to that vision? And what are the projects I can take on to prepare myself for my next move? So people, skills, and projects, these are the things that's going to help you reach your next goals. Projects are super important. Maybe you do have a skill, you do have the person who sponsors you, but you need a better project to showcase your skills and make an impact. So identify where you are, have a vision where you want to be, connect these gaps that's in between your current and your future, and try to fill these gaps with people, skills, and projects. But we're not gonna jump yet. Before we even make a move, we're gonna test the move. We don't wanna move into something different and see, oh, it's not working for me. That might be too late. You might be losing your ideal role. You might be having a great job and then moving to something very new and it's not working. So you lost what you had also. So what's recommended now is to test. So you know what's lacking. You know how you need to fill the gaps. Let's put it into test. Let's look at my example. I want to be a leader from an engineer. So what can I take is a pilot project. So I can talk to my manager and I say, hey, you know what? Can I just have 1 engineer or 2 engineers that I mentor and I lead? And I kind of pilot that, see if it's worked for me. Do I like to work with people? Do I even like leadership? Or I'm not a leadership person. I have to go back to engineering. So try to identify a little pilot projects. And one way that can help you that identify these pilot projects is a triple E factor. So do I enjoy this project? Can I become an expert? And is there room to expand? So if I'm mentoring 2 people, is there room to expand it to 5 people? Is there room to expand this mentorship into a whole new team? And later on, I move to a leadership position. So this triple E factor can help you also move to your stretch zone and doesn't make you move actually to your panic zone or make you comfortable. So we talked about pivots. We talked about these 3 things that you can do and you can enjoy. So next time you hit what's next, or maybe right now you're asking yourself, what's next? Think about these 3. And today, think about that vision that you had for your future, knowing pivoting is not a crisis. It's actually a skill to know how to move forward in your career and to know how to grow. And you can help others with this skill later on. So think about that vision and try to connect your gaps, identify your strengths. Really, tonight, sit and think about what's your strengths and how can you have that planted food in your next move. Thank you everyone for having me.